What was the worst thing someone told you after you beat cancer? The guy at the gym front desk looked me up and down and whispered, "Listen, man, the owner doesn't like skinny guys working out here. You might want to try somewhere else." I told him I'd already paid for the month online, and he just shook his head like I'd signed my own death warrant. Then I saw the owner, Bo, this massive guy doing bicep curls with dumbbells that weighed more than me. The second I walked past him toward the squat rack, his eyes locked onto me with the kind of look a wolf gives a wounded deer. What nobody in this gym knew was that before the cancer, I'd squatted 800 pounds and held world records in 2 different weight classes. The problem was, I didn't know if any of that strength was still buried somewhere, or if the cancer had stolen it permanently. I set up at the squat rack with just the empty barbell for my warm-up, moving precisely the way I'd always done. Bo's workout partner Greg immediately started filming me, narrating loudly enough for everyone to hear. Look at this guy treating 45 pounds like it's a max attempt, probably the most weight he's ever handled in his life. I kept my mouth shut and focused on my breathing, but I could feel Bo watching me from across the gym with increasing interest. When I added 1 plate per side, Bo walked over and stood directly behind me, close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck. "Little man, this is a serious gym for serious lifters. The Planet Fitness is 2 blocks down where they won't judge you for wasting everyone's time." He reached out and poked my exposed spine through my shirt mid-squat. I can count every bone in his back. This kid's built like a xylophone. The poke threw off my balance and I nearly dropped the bar, my face burning as people laughed. Bo's girlfriend wandered over and gasped when she saw me up close. "Oh my God, are you okay? Medically okay?" Bo grabbed my arm and lifted it, showing everyone how his fingers could wrap completely around my bicep with room to spare. "Feel this. It's like grabbing a chicken bone. This is what happens when gamers try to become athletes." More people gathered to watch as I moved to the bench press, and I could see Bo following me, his attention now fully focused on making an example out of me. Greg grabbed my gym bag and dumped everything onto the floor, and my old competition photos scattered across the rubber mats. Pictures from when I weighed 220 pounds of muscle, deadlifting 900 pounds at nationals. Bo picked one up and burst out laughing. "This skeletal loser actually brought fake pictures as inspiration. Look, he photoshopped his face onto a real powerlifter's body." He started tearing them up while I stood frozen, watching 3 years of competitive memories turned into confetti. They brought over the gym scale, and Bo literally picked me up and placed me on it like a child, announcing 132 pounds of pure weakness to everyone. His girlfriend said her purse weighed more, and to prove it, Bo grabbed me under my arms and did bicep curls with my entire body while counting reps out loud. Each lift made my ribs ache where the surgical scars were still tender, but I couldn't break free without looking even more pathetic. Bo ripped my shirt off to compare physiques in the mirror, exposing my surgical scars and protruding ribs to everyone as he flexed next to my skeletal frame. This is what happens when you skip every day. He probably tells girls he's into fitness, like anyone would believe this concentration camp survivor could lift anything heavier than his iPhone. The whole gym was watching now, phones out, and I could see Bo feeding off the attention, getting more aggressive with each passing minute. Greg called the manager over, claiming I was making other members uncomfortable and suggesting I needed medical clearance. Bo added that I was a safety hazard who might collapse. Plus, it's bad for business. New members see this walking skeleton and think our supplements don't work. The manager looked uncomfortable but didn't tell them to stop, and I realized nobody was going to help me. I was loading plates onto the bar when Bo suddenly grabbed my wrist, squeezing hard enough that I felt bones grinding together. "You know what? I think it's time for you to leave." His voice had dropped to something quiet and dangerous, and the playful mockery from before was completely gone. He started dragging me toward the exit while Greg blocked my other side, and I could feel every eye in the gym watching to see what would happen next. "We don't need your kind here, making everyone uncomfortable with your disease-ridden body." That's when something inside me finally snapped. I twisted my wrist using a technique from my old training days and broke his grip, then shoved him backward hard enough that he stumbled. The shock on his face lasted maybe half a second before it transformed into pure rage, and I watched him charge at me with his full 260 pounds of muscle behind him. In that split second, I had to decide if the strength I'd spent 6 months rebuilding in my garage was real, or if I was about to get destroyed in front of everyone. Listen to 90 Seconds and rate me 5 stars on Spotify, doing a giveaway for people who did this and show proof on my Instagram. There will be 4 winners, and you get to choose between a Spotify or Amazon gift card. My body moved on instinct, using a wrist twist I'd drilled thousands of times in high school wrestling. I broke free from his grip and shoved both palms hard into his chest. Bo stumbled backward 3 steps, his face going from shocked to absolutely furious in the time it took him to catch his balance. He came at me fast, all 260 pounds charging like he was going to tackle me through the wall. I sidestepped at the last possible second, my feet remembering footwork patterns my brain had forgotten, and Bo crashed straight into the squat rack. The metallic clang echoed through the entire gym. Weights rattled on their pegs, and the whole rack shifted 6 inches across the rubber floor. Everyone stopped what they were doing and stared. Bo grabbed his shoulder where it had hit the metal upright and spun around looking for me. The gym manager came running over yelling something I couldn't hear over the blood rushing in my ears. 2 staff members in matching black shirts appeared from somewhere. Greg had his phone out filming everything. Someone near the front desk shouted that they were calling 911. I grabbed my torn shirt off the floor where Bo had thrown it. The shredded pieces of my competition photos were scattered everywhere. I scooped up what I could, my hands shaking so bad that I dropped half of them twice. My gym bag was still dumped out near the bench press. I stuffed everything back in as fast as I could while the manager tried to get between me and Bo. I walked straight toward the front door. Nobody tried to stop me. The guy at the front desk who'd warned me earlier just stared as I pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot. The afternoon sun hit my face, and I realized I was only wearing my tank top because Bo had ripped my outer shirt completely off. I made it to my car and got the door open, but my hands were shaking too much to get the key in the ignition. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to make my fingers stop trembling. My ribs ached on the left side where Bo had grabbed me during those bicep curls. I looked down and saw dark purple marks already forming on my wrist where he'd squeezed it. When I lifted my tank top, more bruises were spreading across my ribs right over the surgical scars. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera. My hands steadied enough to take clear photos of my wrist from 3 different angles, making sure the timestamp showed in the corner. Then I took photos of the bruising on my ribs and the torn shirt on the passenger seat. I sat there for another minute trying to decide if I could drive. My vision kept going blurry, and I couldn't tell if I was about to cry or pass out. I pulled up my texts and found Derek's name. "Can you come get me? Something happened at the gym. I'm in the parking lot." I sent it before I could overthink the wording. He texted back in less than 30 seconds asking if I was hurt. I sent him the address and one of the wrist photos. He responded that he was leaving right now. Derek's truck pulled into the parking lot 18 minutes later. I'd been watching the gym entrance the whole time, half expecting Bo to come out looking for me. Derek parked next to my car and got out fast. He took one look at my face through the window, and his expression changed to something I'd never seen before. I opened my door and showed him the bruises and the torn shirt. Derek didn't say anything for a long moment. He just got this quiet, angry look, jaw tight, hands curled into fists. Then he asked if I could walk okay. I told him I could. He said we were going to urgent care right now because he wasn't taking chances with my ribs after the surgery I'd had. I started to argue that I was probably fine, but Derek cut me off and said he was driving me there whether I liked it or not. I grabbed my bag and locked my car. The walk to Derek's truck made my ribs hurt worse. Derek drove fast, but not crazy fast. He asked what happened, and I told him the whole story while we headed across town to the urgent care near his apartment. The bicep curls using my body, the photos getting torn up, the scale, Bo dragging me toward the exit. Derek's knuckles went white on the steering wheel, but he didn't interrupt. When I got to the part about Bo charging me, Derek asked if I hit him first. I explained about the wrist twist and the shove. Derek nodded and said that was self-defense, not assault. We pulled into the urgent care parking lot 20 minutes after he'd picked me up. The waiting room had maybe 5 other people in it. I walked up to the intake desk, and the nurse looked up from her computer. She took one look at me and asked if I was currently in cancer treatment. The question made me want to scream. I told her no, I finished treatment. I just needed someone to check my ribs. She handed me a clipboard with forms and told me to fill everything out, including my cancer history. I sat down in the plastic chairs and started writing. Derek sat next to me and asked if I wanted coffee or water from the vending machine. I said water. The nurse called me back after about 15 minutes. She took my blood pressure and temperature and weight. 134 pounds. I'd gained 2 pounds since the gym scale. She wrote everything down and asked what brought me in today. I showed her the bruises and explained that someone had grabbed me and I was worried about my ribs because I'd had surgery there a few months ago. She asked if this was domestic violence. I said no, it happened at a gym. She made a note in my chart and said the doctor would be in soon. The exam room was cold and smelled like antiseptic. I sat on the paper-covered table and waited. Derek stood near the door looking at his phone. The doctor came in maybe 10 minutes later. She was older, probably in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back. She introduced herself as Dr. Martinez and asked me to explain what happened. I went through the whole story again while she examined the bruises on my wrist. She asked detailed questions about my cancer history, what type, what treatment, when it ended, what surgeries I'd had. She pressed carefully on my ribs where the bruising was worst. I winced when she hit the spot right over my surgical scar. She said she wanted x-rays to make sure nothing was broken or damaged near the surgical sites. A tech came and took me to the x-ray room. I had to hold different positions while the machine clicked and hummed. Back in the exam room, Dr. Martinez said the images would be ready in about 20 minutes. Dr. Martinez came back with the x-ray results on a tablet. She showed me the images and pointed out that nothing was broken or fractured. That was the good news. The bad news was that my bones were still rebuilding density after chemo, and I needed to be really careful about impacts and falls. She asked if I'd been hit in the head at all. I said no. She checked my pupils anyway with a light. Then she wrote down strict instructions on a piece of paper. Follow up with my oncologist within 48 hours. Ice the bruises for 20 minutes at a time. Take ibuprofen for pain, but not more than 600 milligrams at once. Watch for increased pain, swelling, difficulty breathing, or dizziness. Come back immediately if any of those happened. She asked if I felt safe going home. I said yes. She asked if I wanted to file a police report about the assault. I hadn't thought about that. She said the urgent care was required to document injuries that resulted from assault, and she'd be noting everything in my chart. She printed out a copy of her notes and the x-ray report and handed them to me in a folder. Then she left, and the nurse came back to give me discharge papers. Derek drove me to his apartment instead of back to the gym parking lot. He said I could pick up my car tomorrow when I was thinking straight. His place was small but clean, one bedroom with a kitchen that opened into the living room. He pointed me toward the couch and went to make food. I sat there holding the folder from urgent care and staring at nothing. My phone buzzed with texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Somehow people already had photos from the gym. Derek came back with a sandwich and a bag of frozen peas wrapped in a towel. He handed me both and told me to eat and ice my ribs. The sandwich was turkey and cheese. I ate it because Derek was watching me, and I didn't want to argue. He sat in the chair across from me and asked if I wanted to report this to the police. I realized I hadn't thought that far ahead yet. My brain was still stuck on the sound of Bo crashing into the squat rack. Derek said I didn't have to decide right now, but I should think about it. He said people like Bo don't stop unless someone makes them stop. I finished the sandwich and kept the frozen peas on my ribs. Derek turned on the TV to some cooking show neither of us watched. I sat there trying to figure out what happened to my life in the space of 2 hours. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Bo's face or heard people laughing at me in the gym. Derek gave me a pillow and blanket and told me to wake him if I needed anything. I laid on the couch, staring at the ceiling and counting the cracks in the paint. Around midnight, I got up to use the bathroom and saw Derek had left a glass of water and some crackers on the coffee table for me. I ate the crackers even though I wasn't hungry because it gave me something to do besides think. My wrist hurt worse when I wasn't moving it, and the bruises on my ribs made it hard to find a comfortable position. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and a bunch of texts asking if I was the guy from the gym video. I turned my phone face down and tried to sleep again. At 3 a.m., I was still awake, so I pulled up my oncologist's contact info and sent a message through the patient portal requesting an urgent appointment. I explained that I'd been in an incident at a gym and needed to discuss my medical clearance for exercise. The message went through with a little check mark, and I finally fell asleep around 4 a.m. Derek's phone alarm woke me up at 7, and I heard him moving around in the kitchen making coffee. My phone buzzed with a notification from Dr. On's office saying they'd received my message and someone would call me when they opened at 8. I sat up slowly because my whole body felt stiff and sore. Derek brought me coffee without asking if I wanted any and sat down in the chair across from me. He asked if I'd slept at all and I told him maybe 2 hours. The phone rang at exactly 8:15 and the receptionist said Dr. On had reviewed my message and wanted to see me that afternoon at 2:30. She asked if that worked, and I said yes, before she could offer a different time. I thanked Derek for letting me stay, and he drove me back to the gym parking lot to get my car. The gym didn't open until 9, so the lot was empty, except for my beat-up Honda sitting there like evidence of what happened. I drove home and showered and changed into clean clothes. The bruises looked worse in the daylight, and I took more photos with my phone to document how they were spreading. At 2:15, I walked into Dr. On's office and checked in at the front desk. The nurse called me back within 5 minutes and took my blood pressure and temperature like always. She asked me to roll up my sleeve so she could check something, and when she saw the bruising on my wrist, her whole face changed. She typed something into the computer and put a little flag icon next to my name in the chart. She told me Dr. On would be right in and left the room quickly. Dr. On came in 10 minutes later with a tablet showing my chart and the urgent care records they'd sent over. He sat down on the rolling stool and asked me to show him the injuries. I rolled up my sleeve and lifted my shirt to show the bruising on my ribs. He put on gloves and touched the bruises gently, asking if it hurt when he pressed certain spots. I told him it was sore but not terrible. He pulled up the x-ray images on his tablet and showed me that nothing was broken or cracked. He said that was good news, but he was worried about the stress this was putting on my recovery. He asked what happened, and I explained the whole thing from walking into the gym to Bo grabbing my wrist to me shoving him away. Dr. On listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he asked if I had medical clearance paperwork from him to work out. I said no because I didn't think I needed it. He nodded and said that was something they should have discussed earlier, but with everything else going on during my recovery, it had slipped through the cracks. He opened a document on his computer and started typing. He explained that he was writing a detailed medical clearance letter that would state I was approved for progressive strength training under appropriate supervision. He included my cancer history, my current health status, and specific recommendations about what to watch for during exercise. He printed it out on official letterhead and signed it with his actual signature in blue ink. He handed me the letter in a folder and said to keep copies because some gyms might want to keep one on file. I held the folder and felt something loosen in my chest because now I had actual proof that I wasn't just some sick guy who shouldn't be lifting. Dr. On pulled up my recent blood work results and said my iron levels were still lower than he wanted to see. He adjusted my supplement dosage and wrote a new prescription. He said the low iron explained some of the fatigue I'd been feeling and that the new dose should help within a few weeks. I thanked him and scheduled my next follow-up appointment for 6 weeks out. Derek was waiting in his car outside the medical building and drove me back to his place. He made sandwiches, and we sat at his kitchen table eating without talking much. Then he said I should talk to a lawyer about what happened. I told him lawyers cost money I didn't have. He said his sister had used someone named Delaney Bishop for a case a few years ago, and she did a free first meeting to see if you had a case worth taking. I was hesitant because the whole thing felt overwhelming, and I just wanted to forget about it and move on. Derek pointed out that Bo had literally grabbed me and assaulted me in front of a room full of witnesses. He said people like that don't stop unless someone makes them stop. I sat there holding my sandwich and thinking about whether I had the energy to fight this. Then I thought about other skinny guys or sick people walking into that gym and getting treated the same way. I asked Derek for Delaney's number, and he texted it to me right there. I called from his kitchen and got a paralegal who answered on the second ring. I explained what happened at the gym, and she asked a few quick questions about timing and witnesses. She said Delaney had an opening Friday afternoon for a free consultation and asked if that worked. I said yes, and she took down my contact info and told me to bring any documentation I had, including photos and medical records. I hung up and felt like I was actually doing something instead of just being a victim. Derek said I could keep staying at his place until I felt ready to go home, and I took him up on it for one more night. 2 days later, I was back at my own apartment, trying to get back into a normal routine. I made breakfast and checked my email and tried not to think about the gym. Then my phone started buzzing with notifications. I picked it up and saw I had 15 new Instagram notifications, 20 Facebook notifications, and a bunch of texts from people I barely knew. I opened Instagram first and saw that Greg had posted a video. The video showed me shoving Bo, but it was edited to cut out everything that happened before. The caption said something about roid rage from Skeleton Boy and how I'd attacked Bo for no reason. The comments section was already filling up with people I didn't know. Someone said I looked like I was on meth. Someone else said I was clearly mentally unstable. Another person made a joke about concentration camp survivors learning to fight back. I felt my hands start shaking as I scrolled through the comments. The video had been shared to 3 different local gym groups and a bodybuilding forum. People who weren't even there were commenting about how I was obviously on something, or how I must have some kind of complex about my size. Someone recognized me from my competition days and said the cancer must have fried my brain. I watched the share count go up in real time as more people passed it around. My phone kept buzzing with new notifications, and I wanted to throw it across the room. That same helpless rage from the gym came flooding back, and I had to put the phone down and walk away before I did something stupid. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a call from Derek, and I almost didn't answer. He started talking before I could say anything about how he'd been digging through the local gym Facebook groups and found something important. Someone named Noah had posted an unedited version of the whole incident in a private powerlifting group that Derek belonged to, and the video showed everything from when Bo first poked my spine all the way through him grabbing my wrist and dragging me. Derek said he was downloading it right now, and that I needed to save a copy immediately for the lawyer. He also reported Greg's edited video on Instagram for misleading content and told me to do the same from my account. I opened my laptop, and Derek sent me the file through a secure link, and watching the full video made my stomach turn because you could hear everything Bo said about my body and see exactly how aggressive he got. The comments on Noah's post were completely different from Greg's video, with people saying Bo should lose his business license and that this was assault on camera. I saved 3 copies of the video to different locations and texted Delaney's office number to see if I could move up my Friday appointment. The paralegal called me back within an hour and said Delaney had a cancellation Thursday afternoon if I could make it. I showed up to her office with my laptop, phone, a folder of printed medical records, photos of my bruises, and both video files on a flash drive. Delaney's office was small but professional, with framed law degrees on the wall and stacks of case files on her desk that made me feel like she actually worked, instead of just taking consultations. She shook my hand and asked me to walk her through everything that happened at the gym from the moment I arrived. I started with the front desk guy's warning and went through every detail I could remember, showing her the photos of my torn competition pictures and the bruises on my wrist. She took notes in a yellow legal pad and didn't interrupt once, just nodded and wrote down specific quotes when I repeated what Bo had said. When I showed her Greg's edited video first, and then the unedited version, she watched both twice and asked me to send her both files along with the names of anyone I recognized in the background who might be witnesses. Delaney leaned back in her chair and explained that I had solid grounds for a civil case for assault and battery based on the video evidence and medical documentation. She said the criminal side could be handled by the police if I wanted to file a formal report, but that would be a separate process from anything she could do for me. She was straightforward about the fact that legal cases take time and energy, and that I needed to think carefully about what outcome I actually wanted from this. She asked if I was looking for money, an apology, criminal charges, or some combination, because that would determine which path made the most sense. I sat there for a minute thinking about what I actually wanted, and it wasn't really about money, even though my medical bills were piling up. I told Delaney I wanted Bo to face real consequences, so he couldn't do this to someone else, and I wanted the gym to take down all the videos and issue a public apology admitting what happened. She nodded and said those were reasonable goals that we could pursue through a combination of civil demand and potential criminal complaint. Delaney explained her fee structure, which was either a flat rate for specific services or a contingency percentage if we went to full litigation. She said the smart move was to start with a strongly worded legal letter to both Bo and the gym, demanding specific actions before we committed to the time and expense of actually filing a lawsuit. The letter would cost me $500 and would lay out exactly what we had in terms of evidence and what legal claims we could pursue if they didn't respond appropriately. I agreed to the letter approach and signed a limited representation agreement right there, then paid the retainer with my credit card. Delaney said she'd have the letter drafted and sent within 2 business days, and that I should expect either a response or total silence within a week after that. 3 days later, Delaney called to tell me the letters had been sent via certified mail to both Bo personally and to the gym's business address. She'd included copies of my medical clearance from Dr. On, the unedited video file and photos of my bruises, along with a detailed timeline of events. The letter demanded that they preserve all security camera footage and any other recordings of the incident, remove all social media posts about me, issue a written apology, and refund my membership fee. It also made clear that we had documentation of everything and were prepared to pursue both civil damages and criminal charges if they didn't respond appropriately. Delaney said the certified mail tracking showed both letters were delivered and signed for, so now we waited to see how they'd react. The gym manager responded within 3 days, but not in the way I'd hoped. His lawyer sent a formal letter on law firm letterhead, citing the liability waiver I'd signed when I joined and claiming that I'd been disrupting other members with unsafe lifting practices. They denied that any assault occurred and characterized the incident as Bo trying to escort a disruptive member off the premises for safety reasons. The letter said my membership was terminated for violation of gym policies and that they would not be issuing any refund or apology. They also threatened to countersue for defamation if I continued making false claims about their business or staff. I read the whole thing twice and felt my blood pressure spike because they were acting like I was the problem. I met with Delaney again the following Tuesday, and she read through the gym's response with a neutral expression that told me she'd seen this kind of thing before. She laid out 2 paths forward. We could file in small claims court for the membership refund plus damages for the assault, which would be faster and cheaper but limited in what we could recover. Or I could file a formal assault complaint with the police that could lead to criminal charges and give us more leverage in the civil case. Delaney recommended doing both to apply maximum pressure, explaining that the criminal complaint would make the gym's insurance company nervous and might force them to settle rather than risk a trial. She said the police report needed to happen soon because some jurisdictions have time limits on when you can report an assault, and that I should bring all my documentation when I filed. My follow-up appointment with Dr. On was scheduled for that Thursday, and I showed up with my updated medication list and a printout of my recent symptoms. He ran the standard blood panel and checked my surgical sites, then sat down with the results and said my numbers were improving with the adjusted iron supplements. My red blood cell count was up, and my protein levels were better, which meant my body was actually rebuilding muscle tissue. But then he asked about my stress levels and sleep patterns, and I had to admit that I'd been sleeping maybe 4 hours a night and stress eating junk food because cooking felt like too much effort. Dr. An got this concerned look and asked if everything was okay beyond the physical recovery, so I ended up telling him about the gym incident and the legal process. He listened without judgment and then said that chronic stress could slow down my recovery and that I needed to find better ways to manage everything I was dealing with. Dr. An pulled out a referral pad and wrote down a name, Hope Hart, a physical therapist who specialized in working with cancer survivors who were rebuilding strength. He said Hope had worked with several of his patients and understood the specific challenges of training after treatment, including the psychological aspects of dealing with a changed body. Dr. An thought having a structured training plan with professional guidance would help both physically and mentally, giving me concrete goals to focus on instead of just stressing about the legal case. He called Hope's office right there and got me an initial assessment appointment for the following week, then made me promise I'd actually go instead of canceling because I was too busy or anxious. That night, I was lying on my couch trying to watch something mindless on Netflix when my phone buzzed with a DM notification. I opened Instagram and saw a message from an account I didn't recognize, but the profile picture was clearly Bo. The message said that if I didn't drop this legal nonsense immediately, he'd countersue me for defamation and assault, and that he had his own lawyers who were ready to destroy me in court. He wrote that I was trying to ruin his business with lies, and that he'd make sure everyone in the local fitness community knew what kind of person I really was. The message ended with a threat that he had connections and resources I couldn't imagine, and that I was making a huge mistake by coming after him. I took screenshots of the entire conversation, including his profile and the timestamp, then immediately forwarded everything to Delaney with a message asking what I should do. Delaney responded within minutes telling me this was perfect evidence of harassment and threats. She said to save everything, block him on all platforms, and not to respond no matter what he sent next. I took screenshots of the entire message thread, including his profile and the timestamp showing it came after our mediation discussions started, then blocked his account and Instagram and Facebook and anywhere else I could think of. Derek called me that night and asked how I was holding up, and when I told him about the threatening message, he got quiet for a second before offering to let me use his garage gym. He said he had a full squat rack, bench press, and enough plates to work with, plus no cameras and no crowd watching every rep. I felt something loosen in my chest at the idea of training somewhere safe, and I told him I'd take him up on it as soon as I got clearance from the physical therapist Dr. An referred me to. My first appointment with Hope Hart happened 3 days later in a small clinic that smelled like rubber mats and cleaning spray. She had me fill out paperwork about my cancer history, surgeries, and current symptoms before leading me to a private room with mirrors and assessment equipment. Hope spent almost an hour testing my range of motion in every joint, checking for pain or tightness, and having me do basic movements while she watched my form. She asked specific questions about fatigue levels, how my body felt during and after activity, and whether I experienced any nerve pain or numbness from the chemo. When I mentioned that I used to squat 800 pounds, she didn't look impressed or skeptical, just nodded and wrote it down like it was normal information. Hope explained that she'd worked with several cancer survivors rebuilding strength, and that the biggest challenge was usually the mental side of accepting a changed body. She created a 12-week program starting with movements that felt embarrassingly light, like bodyweight squats and assisted push-ups, but she included specific benchmarks for when to increase weight or reps. The program had safety rules about stopping immediately if I felt certain types of pain and tracking sheets to monitor fatigue and recovery between sessions. Hope was clear that comparing myself to pre-cancer numbers would make me miserable and probably lead to injury, and that the goal was just consistent progress week over week. I left her office with a binder full of exercises and instructions, feeling both hopeful and frustrated that I had to start from basically zero. The next morning, I drove to the police station with all my documentation in a folder, including the photos of my bruises, the medical records from urgent care, Dr. An's notes about my cancer history, and both versions of the gym video on my phone. The officer at the front desk directed me to a detective who handled assault cases, and I sat in a small interview room waiting for someone to take my statement. A younger officer came in and listened to my story while taking notes, asking questions about exact times and what specific words Bo used. He was professional and didn't seem judgmental about my appearance or medical history, which was a relief after everything at the gym. When I showed him both video versions, the edited one Greg posted and the full unedited footage, he nodded and said this kind of evidence made cases much stronger. The officer explained that a detective named Williams handled assault cases for the department and would follow up with me within a week to determine next steps. I signed the formal report and left, feeling like I'd actually done something concrete instead of just being a victim. 4 days later, Detective Williams called my cell and asked me to come in for a more detailed interview. His voice was calm and businesslike, and he mentioned he'd handled several assault cases at gyms and fitness centers before, so he understood the dynamics. I scheduled the interview for the next afternoon and spent the time until then reviewing everything that happened so I could answer questions clearly. Detective Williams turned out to be an older guy with gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude that made me feel like he actually cared about getting the facts right. He had me walk through the entire incident from the moment I entered the gym, asking me to be specific about who said what and when physical contact occurred. Williams watched both video versions on his computer, pausing several times to ask about specific moments like when Bo poked my spine or grabbed my wrist. He reviewed all my medical documentation, including the cancer treatment records and the urgent care report about the bruising. Williams asked whether I felt threatened or feared for my safety during the incident, and I told him honestly that when Bo started dragging me toward the exit, I thought he might really hurt me. He nodded and made notes, then asked specific questions about what Bo said regarding my medical condition and whether other gym members intervened. After reviewing everything, Detective Williams explained that with the video evidence and medical records, there was definitely probable cause for assault charges. He was honest, though, that the district attorney's office would consider factors like whether Bo had prior criminal history and whether I wanted to pursue criminal charges or would accept a civil settlement instead. Williams said he'd forward everything to the DA's office with his recommendation to file charges, but that the final decision would take a few weeks. I left the police station feeling validated that someone in authority was taking this seriously and that Bo might actually face real consequences. 2 days after my police interview, Delaney called to tell me the gym manager had reached out through her office requesting mediation. The manager wanted to resolve everything privately without further publicity or legal action, which Delaney said was typical when businesses realized they had real liability exposure. She explained that mediation could actually work in our favor if we set clear terms and that agreeing to mediate wouldn't prevent me from pursuing criminal charges if the mediation failed. Delaney thought we had strong leverage because of the videos and police report, and that the gym would likely agree to significant concessions to avoid a public trial. I told her I'd consider mediation, but only under specific conditions, and she started drafting a response outlining our requirements. We agreed that any mediation had to be recorded, that both Bo and the gym manager had to attend in person, and that any agreement reached had to be put in writing with specific enforcement terms. Delaney created a list of demands to present at mediation, including a full refund of my membership, a public apology from both Bo and the gym, removal of all videos from social media, mandatory staff training on harassment and discrimination, and coverage of all my medical costs, including the urgent care visit and physical therapy. She sent the conditions to the gym's lawyer, and we waited to see if they'd agree to meet on our terms. The mediation office sat on the 3rd floor of a building downtown with gray carpet and conference tables that looked like every other business meeting room I'd ever seen. Delaney arrived with me 20 minutes early, and we waited in a smaller room while she reviewed her notes one more time. When the mediator called us in, I saw Bo already sitting on one side of the table with a guy in a suit who had to be his lawyer. The gym manager sat next to them with a woman Delaney whispered was corporate counsel from the parent company. That detail hit me hard because it meant they were worried enough to bring in serious legal help. The mediator introduced herself and explained the ground rules for the session. Everything said here stayed private unless we reached an agreement. She asked each side to present their version of what happened. Bo's lawyer went first and immediately started talking about how this was just a misunderstanding between gym members. He said Bo was actually trying to help me by suggesting I might be more comfortable at a different facility, better suited to my fitness level. I watched Bo sitting there nodding along like this version made perfect sense. My hands clenched under the table, and I felt that same anger from the gym flooding back. The lawyer kept going, claiming Bo had concerns about my safety and was acting in my best interest when he suggested I leave. Delaney let him finish without interrupting, then calmly asked if she could play some video evidence. She set up her laptop and turned it so everyone could see the screen. The unedited footage started playing, and I watched the mediator's face change as she saw Bo poke my spine mid-squat. When it got to the part where he grabbed my wrist and started dragging me toward the exit, the corporate lawyer shifted in her chair and pulled out a notepad. She started writing fast while the video kept playing. Bo's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the mediator held up her hand and let the whole thing play through. When it finished, the room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Delaney pulled out the medical clearance letter from Dr. On and slid it across the table. I explained my competition history before cancer, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. When I mentioned the 800-pound squat and the world records I used to hold, Bo's lawyer actually looked surprised. He glanced at Bo, who suddenly found the table really interesting and wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. The gym manager jumped in, trying to defend their policies by saying they maintain high standards for serious lifters. Delaney responded that discriminating against someone based on their medical history violated several state and federal laws. She listed them by number, and the corporate lawyer's pen moved even faster across her notepad. The manager started to argue back, but the corporate lawyer actually interrupted her own client and suggested they take a break to discuss some things privately. The mediator agreed and called a 20-minute recess. Delaney and I went back to the smaller waiting room, and she told me the video had landed exactly how she hoped. The corporate lawyer's reaction told her they knew they had real problems. When we returned to the conference room, the gym side had a completely different energy. The corporate lawyer did most of the talking this time and presented a revised offer. They would provide a full refund of my membership fees and remove all videos from their social media accounts. They had drafted a policy on harassment prevention that staff would be required to complete training on. They were willing to cover my urgent care costs from the night of the incident, but they refused to cover Delaney's attorney fees, and they absolutely would not issue a public apology because of concerns about their reputation. I felt frustration building because I wanted them to admit publicly what happened. Delaney asked for a few minutes to confer with me privately. We stepped into the hallway, and she explained that getting the policy changes and cost coverage was actually a bigger win than a forced apology would be. A public apology they were pressured into wouldn't mean anything anyway. She reminded me that we could still pursue criminal charges through Detective Williams if I wanted real accountability beyond this civil agreement. I thought about it for a minute and realized she was probably right. We went back in and told them we'd agree to their terms with one addition. The gym had to send me a written acknowledgement that the incident violated their own policies. It wasn't a public apology, but it was something in writing that admitted fault. The corporate lawyer agreed to that modification, and the mediator started drafting the settlement agreement. We all signed it an hour later after Delaney reviewed every word. I left the mediation office feeling weird, like I'd won something but not quite enough. The anger was less intense than I expected, though. Delaney walked me to my car and reminded me that the criminal case was still open with Detective Williams. The district attorney's office would make their own decision about whether to file charges regardless of this civil settlement. That helped a little, knowing Bo might still face real consequences beyond just writing a check. I drove home and tried to focus on what came next, instead of replaying the mediation in my head. 2 weeks passed with me checking my email constantly for updates from Detective Williams. Nothing came, but I had other things to focus on. Derek had been letting me use his garage gym setup 3 times a week, and I was following the program Hope created. The weights were embarrassingly light, but I was moving without pain for the first time since treatment ended. On a Tuesday morning, I set up for bodyweight squats in Derek's garage with my phone propped up to record my form. Hope wanted video of every session, so she could check that I wasn't compensating with bad movement patterns. I completed the first set of 10 reps and felt nothing except normal muscle fatigue. No pain in my ribs, no weird pulling in my surgical sites, just the basic burn of muscles working. I did 2 more sets and sent the video to Hope right away. She responded within an hour saying my form looked solid and that I was cleared to add light weight next session. That small win felt bigger than anything that happened in the mediation. I was actually moving forward instead of just fighting about the past. 3 days later, Detective Williams called while I was meal prepping in my kitchen. He got straight to the point and explained that the district attorney's office had reviewed everything and was offering Bo a pre-filing diversion program instead of formal charges. If Bo completed anger management classes and paid back my medical costs, the DA wouldn't file criminal charges at all. I asked what happened if he refused or didn't finish the program, and Detective Williams said they'd file charges automatically at that point. The whole thing felt weird because part of me wanted Bo to have an actual criminal record that would show up forever. I thanked the detective and told him I needed to think about it, then immediately called Delaney to get her take on the situation. She picked up on the second ring and listened while I explained the diversion offer and my mixed feelings about letting Bo off without real charges. Delaney explained that diversion programs were super common for first-time offenses and that prosecutors used them to keep cases out of overcrowded courts. She pointed out that I'd avoid months of stress dealing with trial dates and testimony, plus Bo would still have to complete actual requirements and pay actual money. The restitution would cover all my urgent care costs and some of the attorney fees, which wasn't nothing. I asked if accepting the diversion meant giving up on real justice, and Delaney was honest that it wasn't perfect, but it was realistic. She reminded me that going to trial meant Beau's lawyer would probably attack my credibility and drag out my medical history in front of a jury. The thought of sitting in a courtroom while some lawyer suggested I was weak or unstable made my stomach turn. I told Delaney I'd call her back after talking to Derek and Dr. On, then spent the rest of the afternoon trying to figure out what I actually wanted. Derek came over that evening and we talked through the whole situation while sitting in his garage gym. He asked what outcome would let me sleep better at night, and I realized I cared more about training without this hanging over me than I cared about punishing Beau forever. Dr. On's perspective during my next appointment was purely practical about stress and recovery. He said extended legal battles would drain energy I needed for rebuilding strength, and that the diversion terms meant Beau faced real consequences, even without a trial. After 3 days of thinking it through from every angle, I called Delaney and told her I'd accept the diversion terms. It wasn't the perfect justice I'd imagined, but it meant Beau had to do anger management and pay me back. Plus, I could focus completely on training instead of court dates. Delaney contacted the DA's office that same day to confirm my acceptance, and they started drafting the official diversion paperwork. 2 weeks later, I met with the prosecutor to sign everything and review the specific requirements Beau had to complete. The paperwork spelled out that Beau had to finish 12 weeks of anger management classes with a licensed therapist and pay $2,400 in restitution to cover my medical costs from urgent care. If he failed to complete either requirement, criminal assault charges would be filed automatically without any further negotiation. The prosecutor explained that Beau had already been notified and had 30 days to start the anger management program or face immediate charges. I signed the agreement and walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in weeks, like I'd finally closed a door that had been stuck open. The same week the diversion got finalized, Greg's edited video finally disappeared from social media after I'd reported it probably 50 times. The gym removed all their footage from their accounts too, probably because their corporate lawyers told them to after the mediation. I still got nasty comments from people who'd saved copies of Greg's video and uploaded them to random accounts. Someone sent me a message calling me a faker who photoshopped my competition pictures, and another person said I looked like I belonged in a hospital, not a gym. I learned to mute notifications aggressively and block accounts without even reading past the first few words of hate. Derek taught me to just delete and move on instead of trying to defend myself to strangers who'd already decided I was lying. My next training session with Hope marked a huge turning point because she cleared me to add actual weight to the bar for squats. We started with just 95 pounds total, which was the empty bar plus a 25-pound plate on each side. It sounds like nothing compared to what I used to lift, but stepping under that bar with real weight felt massive after months of bodyweight exercises. Hope set up her phone to record my sets from the side angle so she could check my form and make sure I wasn't compensating with bad movement patterns. I completed 3 sets of 5 reps, and the weight felt heavy but manageable, with no pain in my ribs or weird pulling around my surgical sites. Hope reviewed the video between sets and made small adjustments to my stance width and bar position to protect my still healing body. She sent me home with strict instructions to rest for 2 full days before the next session and to text her immediately if anything felt wrong. Dr. On's checkup the following week showed continued improvement in all my blood work numbers, and he seemed genuinely pleased that I was handling the training without any setbacks. My iron levels had come up significantly with the adjusted supplements, and my white blood cell count was solidly in the normal range for the first time since treatment ended. He asked detailed questions about my training schedule and what weights I was using, then nodded approvingly when I explained Hope's conservative approach. The best news was that he reduced my monitoring appointments from monthly to every 6 weeks, since everything was trending in the right direction. I left his office feeling like my body was actually cooperating with the recovery process instead of fighting against it. Derek introduced me to a meet director the next weekend at a local coffee shop near his place. The director ran small powerlifting competitions specifically designed to welcome adaptive athletes and people coming back from injuries or medical issues. He explained that his meets had a completely different vibe from the big national competitions, with way more focus on personal progress than comparing totals. The director looked at my training log that Hope had been keeping and said I should seriously consider competing in about 3 months with whatever numbers I could hit safely. He emphasized that the meet was judgment-free and that plenty of people competed with totals that would seem small to outsiders but represented huge personal victories. I thanked him for the information and told him I'd think about it, but the idea of competing again made my chest feel tight with nervousness. Hope brought up the competition idea during our next training session and said having a concrete goal would help structure my programming better. She thought 3 months gave us enough time to build up to respectable numbers without rushing my recovery or risking injury. We sat down after my workout and mapped out conservative attempt goals that felt both realistic and meaningful. For squats, we set 185 pounds as the target. For bench press, 135 pounds, and for deadlift, 225 pounds. Hope reminded me that these numbers would have been my warm-up weights before cancer, but they represented real progress from where I was now. I felt this weird mix of pride and shame looking at those goals, knowing they were simultaneously huge achievements and tiny compared to my old records. Hope must have seen something on my face because she said the only comparison that mattered was between current me and last month's me, not between current me and pre-cancer me. That perspective helped me accept the goals as legitimate targets worth working toward. The next morning, I pulled up the meet registration website and stared at the entry form for probably 10 minutes before actually filling it out. I paid the $50 entry fee through the website and had to list my weight class, which was 148 pounds, since I'd gained back 16 pounds of muscle over the past few months. The registration confirmation email felt official and real in a way that made this whole comeback feel less like a fantasy and more like something actually happening. I screenshot the confirmation and sent it to Hope, Derek, and Dr. On, with a message saying I'd committed to the meet. It wasn't about the total anymore or trying to reclaim my old records or proving anything to Bo or Greg or anyone else. It was about showing up on that platform and completing 3 lifts as a competitor, proving to myself that I was still a lifter, even if I was a different version than before. And that's where things are now. He's not back to 800-pound squats, but he's squatting with weight on the bar, and that's the win. Look, if this story resonated with you, hit subscribe for more real-life comebacks that don't have Hollywood endings. Just people doing the work and getting a little better each day. All right, catch you in the next one.